Welcome back to the Truth Expedition. I'm your host, Mark Bishofsky. You've tuned in to the program where we dig for truth in this insane clown show of a world where the fact checkers lie all the time and they propagandize you and me, the citizens of this amazing world. This is a corrected. We're going to redo this video. We did this presentation a few days ago. The audio was horrible, so we're going to redo it, and hopefully this doesn't happen again. But as always, joined by my friend and co-host Gunnar Ballstad. How is Gunnar?
I'm doing great today. I'm excited to go through and do this video again. We did a 9/11 video on 9/11, but of course the deep state couldn't have that, so they sabotaged our audio. It could just be normal audio issues, but I blame the deep state. So
Yeah,
we're
I'm
going
going
to
to go
go
with
for
the
this
deep state.
2.0.
Yeah, it's the audio screwed up at about 30-minute mark. So we use StreamYard. It's a podcasting studio suite. I've done several videos with it for both this podcast and Leading Edge Clinic, and there have been no audio issues, but there was for the 9/11 one. But, without further ado, we're just going to get at it, get this done. We don't want to waste your time or ours, so we're just going to present the facts about 9/11. So go ahead,
We're going to
Gunnar.
present the facts about 9/11. I want to reiterate, too, that the Truth Expedition really was our collaboration for the Truth Expedition 2.0 really was born on September 11th, 2 years ago, when I reached out to Mark and just said, let's get some coffee. And we chatted, and it turns out we shared a lot of the same ideas and had a lot of the same questions about 9/11. So we've learned a lot in the last 2 years. We've had a lot of guests on our show that have enlightened us. So please do go back and watch some of the previous episodes. But the point of this episode is to give a succinct evidence of the 9/11 and how it was it did not occur according to the official narrative, that it was an inside job, that it was a false flag, and that it was foreign intelligence that was the main orchestrator. So what we're going to do today is kind of go case by case, kind of put together these different pieces of evidence and tie them together to demonstrate that there is no way the official narrative is legitimate, and that this was an inside job that was planned months, years, decades ahead of time. So for me, let's start this off. So for me, what really was the causal factor in me to reject the official narrative was Building 7. When you watch Building 7 fall down, it appears as if it's exactly like a controlled demolition. When I was a kid, I remember being absolutely enthralled by these types of controlled demolitions when you would see around the country these planned demolitions. They would air them on live TV. They would hype them for weeks and air them on live TV, and you would see a building just absolutely fall down in its footprint at free fall speed. That's only possible when you have set charges on the main columns, the main pillars of the building itself. So, in order for a building to drop at free fall speed, you would need to have a pre planned operation that wired the building for explosives and had them explode just at the right time so that the building would drop. Okay. So that's what we see in Building 7. So let's show that evidence now. Let's bring that screen up.
Danny Jowenko is the expert on this in Europe. What did he say?
Dit is controlled demolition. Zeker weten, zeker weten. Er is nagesprongen. Dit is in opdracht gebeurd. Dit heeft een team gedaan van experts.
Let's compare. Explosives are used to demolish buildings like this in just seconds. Okay, so it's a controlled demolition. What's the problem with that? Well, it happened on the afternoon of 9/11 at the World Trade Center. Let's just think about this. Controlled demolitions cannot be engineered and rigged in a day. It takes months. And therefore, this event must have been planned in advance.
Keep your eye on that building. It'll be coming down.
building's about to blow up. Move it back. We are walking back. There's a building about to blow up.
Did they actually use the word brought down, and who was that was telling you this?
The fire department, and they did use the word, we're going to have to bring it down.
And these people heard explosions.
We heard this sound that sounded like a clap of thunder. It looked like there was a shockwave ripping through the building, and the windows all busted out. About a second later, the bottom floor caved out. The building followed after that.
He takes his hand off, and you hear 3, 2, 1, and it was boom, 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 boom.
And these reporters recognized it as a controlled demolition.
And I turned in time to see what looked like a skyscraper implosion. Looked like it had been done by a demolition crew. The whole thing just collapsing down on itself.
For the third time today, it's reminiscent of those pictures we've all seen too much on television before, when a building was deliberately destroyed by well-placed dynamite to knock it down.
It was almost as if it were a planned implosion. It just pancaked.
So what's the
Okay, so that is incredibly relevant because in the official narrative, they claim that that building 7, which was the third building to fall on 9/11, was fell because of office fires. That it was office fires that were burning for too hot and for too long that caused the building to fall in free fall at a free fall rate. Absolutely ridiculous. The official narrative is a lie. It's a fabrication. There was a study out of Alaska, the University of Anchorage, that conducted a study to demonstrate that there's no way office fires took the building down, that it had to have been pre-planted, controlled demolition at the right time that would allow it to drop in its footprint at free fall speed.
Yeah, they said it was office fires, a couple trash cans on fire, maybe a wooden desk here or there, which, okay, there were office fires. This building we're showing you on the screen right now is called the Greenfell building in the UK. This building was built in the same era, the same construction techniques, steel framed building, pretty much the same as it's smaller. I think the World Trade Center 7 was 47 stories. This building is more like 30. Nonetheless, this building here burned for 60 hours. For 60 hours. An inferno, the entire building burning. And it remained standing after burning for that many hours. So it's just one more little piece of, evidence supporting our claim that it was a controlled demolition.
Yep, and that when most folks look at Building 7, that I think is their ticket into the 9/11 conspiracy. That evidence shows conclusively that the official narrative is bunk.
Should also mention about the BBC reporting that it fell 20 minutes before it fell. The building's behind them standing, and they said it had fallen. So they got some bogus. Their script was off in timing.
Right. A lot of questions still to be answered about 9/11 and Building 7, but we can't have those answers unless we hold our federal government accountable. So this is the ticket in for most people. Once they see Building 7, that it was a controlled demolition that had to have been pre-planned. There's no way that Al-Qaeda snuck in there the day of and planted explosives. This was done by a professional crew well ahead of time. So that's Building 7. Let's go to the Twin Towers.
Rather than a slow groaning collapse that we might anticipate, the Twin Towers show in the videos a very rapid, sudden onset of destruction. What does this imply?
This claim that the upper section of each of the towers crushed the lower section. However, when you watch video closely, in the case of World Trade Center 1, you'll see that the upper section disintegrates itself. It appears to be a controlled demolition of its own of the upper section.
The top section pushing on the bottom section, it's going to meet equal forces as it goes. both sections are going to be demolished at the same rate. So by the time you've crushed up 15 stories below it, the top 15 stories are also going to be crushed. And so there's nothing left now to crush the rest of the building. You're looking for a jolt, that this thing, if it actually comes down and hits, you should be able to see the point at which they actually impact, because it would actually slow down the motion of the falling block.
Before the tower started collapsing from the top, the antenna started to fall. And the antenna, of course, was over the middle of the elevator shafts. I'm very familiar with the interior structure that surrounded the elevator shafts and the accessibility which the elevator companies had 24/7.
It wouldn't be a problem once you gained access to the elevator shafts. Then a team of loading experts would have access to all the core columns and beams. The rest could be accomplished at that point by just the right kind of explosives for the job at hand.
The only way that I can see that the towers could have collapsed is that the interior columns were compromised.
Over 100 first responders reported sounds of explosions and flashes of light at the onset of destruction of both towers. These were not discussed in the NIST report. What did these eyewitnesses actually see and hear?
As we were getting our gear on and making our way to the stairway, there was a heavy-duty explosion
inside the lobby.
We stuck on the stairs for a while. We finally got down to the lobby. Then we get to the lobby, it was this big explosion.
There were numerous secondary explosions taking place in that building. There were continuous explosions.
Floor by floor, instead of popping out. It was if they had detonated.
Okay, so how is this possible again? Just like Building 7, the only way that those towers could have fell at that rate, at free fall speed, at the acceleration due to gravity, is if the columns underneath, the floors underneath, were taken out at the correct time. So like these architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth, which we've interviewed the gentleman in that video, Richard Gage, on one of our shows. You can go back and watch that. Like they're demonstrating, the only way that that's possible is, again, just like Building 7, if they're pre-wired with explosives. Now, there is a lot of evidence that show the World Trade Centers were compromised and occupied. Certain intelligence communities had access. Bush's family, one of President Bush at the time, his brother or cousin was sitting on the board of the security firm that had access to the Twin Towers. So the amount of involvement with our elite and our federal government at the time is everywhere, ubiquitous. I think that one of the most telling pieces, I think, is the metallurgy on that day, what happened specifically with the metal. So when the towers fell, for 3 weeks afterwards, there was molten magma at the base of the towers. Witnesses saw white hot metal, steel, flowing from the World Trade Center. Now, I'm a 9/11 conspiracy theorist, so I'm happy to engage other folks on the topic. And indeed, I chatted with one of my neighbors who I went to high school with. I know this guy very well and trust him. And so I was chatting with him, and he told me that his father is a metallurgist, and he specializes in material sciences. And he looks at the different properties of metal when it's in construction and studies their failure points. So I chatted with him, his father, and he said that he doesn't know anything about 9/11. He doesn't claim that it's necessarily an inside job or what have you. But when he saw the white hot steel flowing from the World Trade Center, he knew that jet fuel could not cause that. The mere friction and abrasion from the towers falling also wouldn't cause that excessive heat. That the only way you could get white hot steel is with an incendiary device. So he knows his piece. That's the interesting thing about the 9/11 conspiracy, is that everyone knows a little bit of something. People have researched their own area of expertise. And as we all bring this evidence together, we paint a pretty clear picture. So that's the World Trade Center. Now let's go on and talk about what I think is one of the
I'm gonna
most.
add just a couple things to that. And I know you're going to get into some with Israelis, but if you watched our interview with Ken McCarthy, he talked about who wired the building. And so there's Israeli, everyone's maybe heard of the dancing Israelis or the celebrating Israelis, but there were Israeli art students. Whether or not they were art students, I don't know. Somebody went into that building. You can see here's a picture from the building. And on this box, you can see it's BB-18. I don't know how legitimate this photo is, but BB-18 is a fuse. Apparently these workers pulled up in vans had coils of cable and toolboxes. So there's that. And as far as being a 9/11 conspiracy theorist, I just want to point out that everybody is a 9/11 conspiracy theorist. Whether or not you believe the mainstream narrative or some other narrative, you're a conspiracy theorist, because it was a conspiracy and they're all theories. Nothing's proven. So we are all conspiracy theorists. And I like to point that out to normies who call me a conspiracy theorist. It's one of my ways to combat that label. You are a conspiracy theorist. If you believe what you're being told, you are a conspiracy theorist.
That's right. So let's look at this next piece of evidence, and that is what I think is also some of the most crucial, because everyone trusts our first responders. Everyone trusts our firefighters and our wonderful folks that drive ambulances, people who get there right away. These medics and these firefighters ought to be trusted, and we should be doing everything we can to support their careers and their findings of 9/11. So there is a group of firefighters in New York that have been asking these questions since 9/11. Like, how were there explosives? How did these buildings fall when the structural integrity seemed to be sound? So let's trust our first responders and let's hear from them now.
And finally, why can't Americans hear about FDNY Battalion Chief Oriel Palmer, who succeeded in making it to the point of impact on the 78th floor of the South Tower with his men, and reported that he had 2 isolated pockets of fire and that we should be able to knock it down with 2 lines. So he made it up to the fire floor and he saw what was going on. And contradicting the official storyline that it was a raging fire up there. Here's a brave fireman who made it onto the fire floor and was doing his job. 1 minute after the final transmission, the South Tower collapsed. Why can't Americans hear about that it took a lawsuit under the Freedom of Information Act by the New York Times to get the fire department tapes released so that the public could hear exactly what the firefighters said? This occurring in August of 2005, almost exactly a year after 9/11 Commission had disbanded. That is not justice.
Okay, so we want justice for those firefighters that perished on that day. I think it is incredibly tragic what happened to them. The first responders that afterwards, they were told that the air was clear, that it was okay to go in and do these rescue efforts and these cleanup efforts, when in fact the aftermath was laden with asbestos and all kinds of harmful materials a lot of these first responders are having medical issues, and a lot of them have passed from being heroes. I think that the story of the firefighters, the profession of that these people hold is one that we absolutely have to respect. And again, we need to believe our first responders. Let's play another video. I think that is incredibly telling.
Well, what do you think happened on 9/11?
What I know happened on 9/11 was we could have prevented it. And number two, what happened? I work very closely with the architects and engineers. You've had them on.
Yes.
I work closely with the families of 9/11. I work closely with the firefighters. The most poignant story, you ought to show it on a tape, is when Deputy Chief Oriole Palmer, one of the most decorated firefighters in the city, takes his unit to the first building. He climbs, he gets in an elevator. He's got all his equipment on, 40 pounds of gear with his team. They go up 40 floors in an elevator while the planes have already hit. He gets off the elevator and you hear him say in the microphone, "We're on the 40th floor. Everything's okay. We're going to walk up." He gets on the 50th floor. "It's okay. We're going up higher." He gets on the 60th floor. "It's okay. We're going up." The Oriole Palmer, battalion chief, reaches the 78th floor, the floor of impact, comes out of the stairwell, and you hear him say as clear as day, "We're here, the floor of impact. We've got 2 fires, and we can handle them." And the building collapses within 1 minute.
Get out of here.
No, that's true. Every American needs to listen to Oriole Palmer.
Is that the video?
The video is on Bravo
Rob,
7.
can you play that, Rob?
Yep. Listen to his voice.
Here in the B stand, we'll meet up with you. You get over to the A stand and help out Chief Palmer. Battalion 7 Operations Count 1, Battalion 9, and he's on the full boat 79. We have access stairs going up to 79. Okay. All right, I'm on my way up, Oriole. 15 elevator 15. Sorry, 15 elevator, Battalion 7 Operations Count 1. Stop in the elevator shaft. You're going to have to get a different elevator. We're chopping through the wall to get out. Radio lobby command with that. Tower 1. Battalion 7 ladder 15.
Look at that, Joe Firestarter again. Think about it, everybody broke down. There's no way to live it. Holy shit! Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god! The World Trade Center just fell. Oh my god! The whole World Trade
Deserve better than this, Patrick.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question about that. So you were saying that, but again, question, why did 9/11 happen?
I don't want to speculate. I think it already is the biggest nightmare in the history of the country.
Yeah. So again, I know that's really difficult to watch. I think for most people, it's really challenging to see the World Trade Center and just the natural reaction of people. We've seen it so many times and been brainwashed and traumatized by it. But when you fully understand the people that were there, their present sense impression that it was impossible for these buildings to fall. How could this happen? And that it was controlled demolition. I mean, the members of the press that saw it and said that this is controlled demolition. I think that the immediate response there is incredibly telling. And again, when we look at the firefighters that perished that day, those brave people, we need to be asking questions for them. It is not an insult or offensive to 9/11 families and victims to seek justice. It is an insult to swallow the official narrative.
Yeah, it's made me sick watching it again there, just thinking about those firefighters. You know, that's murder. There's no question that our government or a segment of our government was aware, probably was part of the planning, along with probably Israel, Saudi Arabia. It wasn't 19 guys with box cutters organized by some bearded freak in a cave. Just not. not the case. I mean, they were maybe involved. I mean, bin Laden was a CIA asset. We know this. So we'll probably never know the entire truth, but there is a push right now. Senator Ron Johnson was just on the Corbett report, blowing the whistle. They're going to push for another 9/11 commission. That was Senator Weldon or Congressman Weldon.
Kurt Weldon. Yeah, he
Kurt
was
Weldon
a
just
congressman and no longer is in Congress, but
then
is
Tucker.
doing good work.
Tucker doing his 4-part documentary on it, which he postponed because of what the Charlie Kirk tragedy. But yeah, there is a groundswell of activity around 9/11 truth. So we can hope and pray that eventually we do know the truth.
Indeed. So who done it? I think that's a really fascinating question here. A lot of people don't know that for the first 3 years after 9/11, bin Laden, in fact, denied any involvement. And when he finally did fess up, if you will, the videos of him actually admitting to the crime are suspected to be fake. So a lot of people have analyzed the video, saying that bin Laden is younger in the videos, that it doesn't reflect bin Laden's posture or speech cadence. So let's hear what bin Laden had to say right after the attacks.
Osama bin Laden, number one on everybody's most wanted list in the world today, is saying that once again that he did not do it. Don't hold him responsible. He's not guilty. He, of course, is the man that has been fingered by just about everybody in the world. And now he's released a statement really underlining that he had nothing to do with it. So let's go through the statement. There's some interesting aspects to this. He said, after the recent attacks, which the U.S. has witnessed, the U.S. government ventured to point fingers at me, accuse me of involvement. The U.S. government has consistently blamed me for being behind every occasion its enemies attack it, that is the United States. And it goes on. I would like to assure the world that I did not plan the recent attacks, which seems to have been planned by people for personal reasons. And as for me, I have been living in the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan and following its leader's rules. The current leader does not allow me to exercise such operations. Well, Jack, we can all weigh that on the scale of credibility and come to our own conclusion.
So when we look at that piece, when we look at bin Laden denying it for the first 3 years, I think that's incredibly important. I think it's telling. I think that if he were behind it, he would be bragging and boastful. A federal judge just this last week allowed for the first time the victims' families to begin court proceedings against the government of Saudi Arabia. So when we look at the 9/11 hijackers, we see that the CIA and the Saudi royal family, as well as the Mossad, were tracking them, knew where they were, lived in close proximity. And the signature of an intelligence operation is incredibly overwhelming. Yeah, so I don't believe that bin Laden did it. I don't buy the official narrative.
No, I don't either. And I think we're going to get deeper into why we think that shortly here.
Let's look at what Netanyahu said regarding the World Trade Center. Let's remember that the 1993 bombing of the World Trade Center by the Blind Sheik was largely seen as FBI entrapment, that they planned the attack and could have stopped it but didn't, just like Oklahoma City. The signature of an intelligence operation is ubiquitous. Let's listen to what Netanyahu had to say about his book and the World Trade Center.
Gunnar, turn the volume up on your feed. Your voice is a little louder than the videos. So
Okay.
I think it'll be all right, but maybe just turn it up just a touch.
I was getting this question in the 1990s, and I said that the West really doesn't understand militant Islam. So I wrote a book in 1995, and I said that if the West doesn't wake up to the suicidal nature of militant Islam, the next thing you'll see is the militant Islam is bringing down the World Trade Center.
So again, when we look at a couple pieces of evidence here, who was really surrounding the World Trade Center? Who had access control over the World Trade Center complex? Who was really interested in it? Well, it seems like Netanyahu was, and it seems like his buddy, Larry Silverstein, who just purchased it, was also concerned about a terrorist attack. So he took out an insurance policy that would cover the World Trade Center that paid double because of the two attacks on 9/11. So how did he prepare, and what is the connection between Netanyahu and Silverstein? And why would they be, why would there be a connection at all? Well, according to this Haaretz article that was behind a paywall, and finally we got access to it. But this article states that for years, Silverstein and Netanyahu kept in touch, that every Sunday afternoon, Netanyahu would call Silverstein. Made no difference what the subject was or where Netanyahu was, he would always call, Silverstein told an Israeli acquaintance. So why were these two talking beforehand? To me, it's indicative that they were planning the attack and the aftermath to get their story straight. Here we have bin Laden denying it, and we have Netanyahu's signature all over it.
Yeah, and Netanyahu said shortly after the World Trade Center fell that it was good for Israel. So there's that as well.
Okay, so the other thing I think that is incredibly damning for evidence is the war games that were occurring on 9/11. So just like the 7/7 tube bombings in London, where the authorities were planning for an attack in the subway system, and just like the Boston Marathon bombing, where authorities were similarly planning for a bomb attack, on 9/11, the day of, there were war games going on that were the most amount of activity in the history of the United States in conducting these types of war game scenarios.
Yeah,
So,
on a Corbett Report documentary said it was possibly the busiest day of aviation in the Northeast in the history of the United States.
so let's get to Corbett's documentary here. He is very prolific in his producing this type of content. It was Senator from Wisconsin, Ron Johnson, who was recently on Corbett's show. And Ron Johnson admitted that Corbett really is the authority on this topic. He is the expert on this topic, and he has many videos on 9/11. All of them are jam-packed full of explosive evidence, really. So let's look at what Corbett has to say about the 9/11 war games that were occurring on the day.
Matthew Rosenberg, an Army medic at the DeLorenzo TRICARE Health Clinic, sits down in Corridor 8 of the Pentagon to study a new medical emergency disaster plan based on the unlikely scenario of an airplane crashing into the place. And in Chantilly, Virginia, just 4 miles from the runway of Dulles Airport, the military and CIA personnel who staff the National Reconnaissance Office are beginning an exercise in which a plane crashes into their building. Members of the Joint Special Operations Command, the U.S. military's top counterterrorism unit, are in Hungary preparing for Jackal Cave, a highly classified joint readiness exercise. Fighter pilots deployed to monitor the Russian Air Force's training exercise in the Arctic are readying themselves for a day of maneuvers in Alaska and northern Canada. And at NORAD's Combat Operations Center at the Cheyenne Mountain Complex in Colorado, military commanders are preparing for one of the busiest days of war games and exercises in the history of the United States.
Michael Rupert is standing by at his office in Sherman Oaks, California. Michael, thanks for this. What is the reason for the failure of U.S. military jets to show up in a timely fashion on 9/11?
Well, the simple fact is, Barry, that they didn't know where to go. The reason that they didn't know where to go was because a number of conflicting and overlapping war game exercises were taking place, one of which Northern Vigilance had pulled a significant number of North American fighter aircraft into Canada and Western Alaska and Northern Alaska in a mock Cold War hijack exercise. There was another drill, Vigilant Guardian, which was a hijack exercise a command post exercise, but it involved the insertion of false radar blips onto radar screens in the Northeast Air Defense Sector. In addition, we have a confirmation, thanks to General Richard Myers, who was acting chairman of the Joint Chiefs, who told Richard Clark, as reported in Clark's book, that there was another exercise, Vigilant Warrior, which was, in fact, according to a NORAD source, a live fly hijack drill being conducted at the same time. With only 8 available fighter aircraft, and they have to be dispatched in pairs, they were dealing with as many as 22 possible hijacks on the day of 9/11, and they couldn't separate the war game exercises from the actual hijacks.
Yes, on the morning of September 11th, 2001, the stage was perfectly set for an unprecedented day of simulated terror throughout the northeastern United States. And then, it all happened for real. Part 4. This is not an exercise.
11, if you hear Boston Center. Hi, Boston Center, Team U. We have a problem here. We have a hijacked aircraft headed towards New York, and we need someone to scramble some F-16s or something up there to help us out.
Is this real world or exercise?
No, this is not an exercise, not a test.
Confusion.
Okay, now we do. Yes, this is what I got. You hear put that input about possible news is 737 just hit the World Trade Center. This is real world. And we're trying to confirm this. Okay, continue taking the fighters down to the New York City area, JFK area as best as we can. Make sure that the FAA clears your route all the way through. Just do what we got to do, okay? Just press with us. It looks like somebody. It looks like this guy could have hit the World Trade Center.
Chaos.
Do we want to think about scrambling aircraft? Oh, God, I don't know. That's a decision somebody's going to have to make probably in the next 10 minutes. Everybody just left the room.
Paralysis. There are many ways to describe the FAA, DoD, and NORAD response to the events of 9/11. But given that, according to the official 9/11 conspiracy theory, not a single fighter jet was able to intercept a single hijacked airliner between the first hijacking report at 8:20 a.m. and Flight 93's downing nearly 2 hours later at 10:03 a.m. The claim that the response to these events was actually enhanced by the war games and exercises taking place that morning is downright absurd.
The question was, we had 4 war games going on September 11th, and the question that I tried to pose before the secretary had to go to lunch was whether or not the activities of the 4 war games going on September 11th actually impaired our ability to respond to the attacks.
Your mic muted.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so Cynthia McKinney, the brave congresswoman from Georgia, was ousted by AIPAC for asking too many questions about 9/11. When you look at James Corbett's 9/11 War Games video, you'll see that the parallels of the exercises that were going on that day were more than likely designed to confuse the response as opposed to the claims that it actually made the responses faster. Again, there was no response. Now, especially when you consider that in the top of the pyramid of the hierarchy of the command chain, just so happened to be NORAD and the Pentagon, where Cheney is stating that he did not want interception, that he was telling folks in the room to stand down and not impede. And so it's just another damning piece of evidence that shows that that was a pre-planned event, a false flag, an inside job with all of the people that needed to be orchestrating the event in the proper place at the proper time.
Yeah, it's damning evidence.
Let's keep going here. I think another thing that is incredibly fascinating is the testimony of Captain Dan Hanley. We interviewed him on our show. He's a very brave pilot who was flying with was flying on the day of, and knew a lot of the pilots that perished or were flying out of the different airports that the hijackers used. So his contention is this: it's incredibly fascinating. But when he looked at the flight plans that the hijackers took, that the patterns that they took, the actual course that they were on, that these maneuvers that they had to make were basically impossible for an inexperienced pilot to make. So what he set up was and participated in is simulations. He had expert pilots try to simulate these types of wild maneuvers that would allow these huge planes to hit these small targets. So he's saying that this is basically impossible for an inexperienced pilot to execute. So how was it done? Well, Boeing had a experimental piece of technology called the uninterruptible autopilot, and that would allow the FAA or whomever to take control over a hijacked airplane and fly it safely to the ground. This technology more than likely existed at the time. And in fact, there's a little known story that there was a fifth plane that never actually took off, that the hijackers were not able to hijack the plane because the plane didn't take off in time. They got incredibly aggravated, these people who were the suspected hijackers, but and they were allowed to get off of the plane as everyone was removed from the plane. Afterwards, some of the pilot and crew returned to the plane to see that some of the doors to the electrical bays had been opened from the inside, that there was potentially a stowaway that went in there and took any potential weapons or tools that they would have used to hijack the plane. And when you look at Dan Hanley's testimony with the uninterruptible autopilot combined with the testimony of the pilots and the other staff that were aboard the plane, that something seemed to have been tampered with in the electrical systems. Perhaps what they did was they removed the uninterruptible autopilot from the plane that was not allowed to take off. So let's listen to Captain Dan Hanley's testimony or statements here on the uninterruptible autopilot.
Yes, I do not believe the murder-suicide hypothesis is accurate. It's very easy to blame dead pilots for an accident because they cannot defend themselves. But there is a viable alternative explanation for what possibly could have happened to Malaysia Air 370. And it's very similar to what happened with the 4 9/11 aircraft, in that all 5 aircraft veered wildly off course. They lost communication, and they also lost their radar transponder that air traffic control used to identify the aircraft. If you Google Boeing Honeywell uninterruptible autopilot, the first thing you'll see is a Wikipedia article that's somewhat misleading. It states the stated purpose of this system is to prevent would-be hijackers from commandeering a commercial jet aircraft in flight by remotely taking control of the aircraft autopilot and flight management computers and guiding it to one of many airports in the world and safely auto-landing it. The article is misleading because it states Boeing patented it in 2006. While that may be true, we have proof that the technology was developed and produced in the mid-90s. So our contention is that this system was in fact employed on 9/11, but not to hijack an airplane and take it someplace to land it, but to crash it into buildings. And because of the similar flight patterns between the 4 hijacked aircraft on 9/11 and Malaysia Air 370, we actually believe that we allege that Malaysia Air 370 may very well have been hijacked because electronically, because if you look, there's no sign of any wreckage. It's a viable alternative. We cannot prove yet that these systems were employed, but we are working on that right now.
I don't think the deep state is ever going to let that evidence come out. From my understanding, the black boxes from 9/11 have yet to be found. They never will be.
Yeah, if there was nothing to hide, why wouldn't they just release it? You know, and they you hear Bush, you hear Cheney, Condoleezza Rice, Rumsfeld all saying, "Oh, it was inconceivable." Who would have ever thought that hijackers would fly airplanes into buildings? Just playing dumb. I mean, just unbelievable lies. The level of lying there is psychopathic because they knew this was a risk. They had talked about it in the past. Plus, they had Operation Northwoods, where during the 60s it was proposed that they do this so they could attack Cuba. To think that they didn't think that this could happen, and it wasn't on their radar, no pun intended, is not believable.
Just like the Corvette War Games documentary, he does show in the beginning all of the times that scenario had been contemplated and a war game response was created, and the scenario was acted out. So they were aware of this, and in fact, Condoleezza Rice is on video saying that she received a letter warning from her employees that Bin Laden may be hijacking an airplane in the coming days. So I think that this is just another strong indication that there's a cover up and that the official story is bogus, and that it's right of us to ask more questions, even though we may not get to the bottom of all of these. The general aim and scope that 9/11 was conducted by foreign intelligence and our own government is overwhelming. It absolutely happened, and it's tough, I think, for American citizens to swallow. But after COVID and other shenanigans, the doors are opening up for folks to become aware of these transgressions against our state and our wonderful country here. So I am very patriotic. I love our country, and I want to see justice for all the folks who perished on 9/11, all of the brave individuals that signed up to defend our country overseas, and all of the victims of our bombs on the other end. All of these wars that happened after the fact were really spawned by 9/11. So we'll touch on that again in a few minutes. But let's play this next video. A lot of people don't know this, but we caught the folks involved. We caught the folks involved basically on the day of that. There was indication that there was an Israeli spy ring in the United States that was looking at members of our elite and people within our intelligence community were being confronted, or they were being surveilled by these Israeli art students who were trying to sell art that had within the frames and the art listening devices. There's a track record of Israel spying on our government. And in fact, the most recent reporting is that when a series of diplomats were here on the last visit, that they actually planted listening devices in Trump's vehicles. Absolutely insane. So on 9/11, there's, of course, the story of the dancing Israelis. This is a story of a lady who observed suspicious individuals that appeared to be celebrating the attacks on the Twin Towers. They were later apprehended after she called the police. They were apprehended with thousands of dollars of cash on their person, passports, plane tickets to leave the country the next day. And they all worked for an Israeli front company called Urban Moving Systems that was run by an Israeli intelligence agent, Dominic Suter. The FBI went in and looked at the operation of Urban Moving Systems, and noted that there was a serious lack of moving equipment, but there was a whole lot of sophisticated computers and other types of electronics that were not indicative of a moving company, but more of an intelligence surveillance type operation. When the dancing Israelis were apprehended, they spent about 6 months in U.S. custody. They failed lie detector tests. Some of the vehicles that they were driving and apprehended in had explosive residue within the vans themselves. So Fox News did some very good reporting until they finally pulled the plug. They weren't allowed to cover this type of thing any longer. These videos are really hard to find. Thank God for the internet that is preserving so many of these videos. Here's one that Fox did shortly after 9/11.
Now, Fox News has learned some U.S. investigators believe that there are Israelis again very much engaged in spying in and on the U.S., who may have known things they didn't tell us before September 11th. Fox News correspondent Carl Cameron has details in the first of a 4-part series.
Since September 11th, more than 60 Israelis have been arrested or detained, either under the new Patriot anti-terrorism law or for immigration violations. A handful of active Israeli military were among those detained, according to investigators, who say some of the detainees also failed polygraph questions when asked about alleged surveillance activities against and in the United States. There is no indication that the Israelis were involved in the 9/11 attacks, but investigators suspect that the Israelis may have gathered intelligence about the attacks in advance and not shared it. A highly placed investigator said there are, quote, tie-ins, but when asked for details, he flatly refused to describe them, saying, quote, evidence linking these Israelis to 9/11 is classified. I cannot tell you about evidence that has been gathered. It's classified information. Asked this week about another sprawling investigation and the detention of 60 Israelis since September 11th, the Bush administration treated the questions like hot potatoes.
I would just refer you to Department of Justice with it. I'm not familiar with the report.
I'm aware that some Israeli citizens have been detained. With respect to why they are being detained and the other aspects of your question, whether it's because they are in intelligence services or what they were doing, I will defer to the Department of Justice and the FBI to answer that.
Beyond the 60 apprehended or detained and many deported since September 11th, another group of 140 Israeli individuals have been arrested and detained in this year in what government documents describe as, quote, an organized intelligence gathering operation designed to, quote, penetrate government facilities. Most of those individuals said they had served in the Israeli military, which is compulsory there, but they also had, most of them, intelligence expertise and either worked for Amdocs or other companies in Israel that specialize in wiretapping. Earlier this week, the Israeli embassy here in Washington denied any spying against or in the United States.
Carl, what about this question of advanced knowledge of what was going to happen on 9/11? How clear are investigators that some Israeli agents may have known something?
Well, it's very explosive information, obviously, and there's a great deal of evidence that they say they have collected, none of it necessarily conclusive. It's more when they put it all together. A bigger question, they say, is how could they not have known? Almost a direct quote, Brett.
How could they not have known? I think that's very sad, actually. If it's our best ally and they had information, at least foreknowledge of the attacks, why didn't they let us know?
Yeah, it's wild. And I should add, so this is a picture here of 3 of the 5. I thought I had another picture here of the 5 of them, but the thing is, when they got back, they were finally released without charges, sent back to Israel, and they were on a talk show when they got back, and they said that their purpose was to document the event. So they were in eyewitness testimony puts them in a location before the first plane impacted, in a location with a perfect view of the Twin Towers. No reason for them to be on this top of this parking garage at that time of day. And then when the plane hit, they started to celebrate, like holding lighters up in front of the buildings like they were burning, high-fiving, hugging. Just, come on. I mean, I don't care if you
Bizarre behavior from these urban moving systems folks. And when you look at their ties to Israeli intelligence, when you look at the fact that they were pulled over with explosive residue in their vans, They don't look like Al-Qaeda to me. It doesn't seem like Al-Qaeda was surrounding the World Trade Center. It seems like it was Israeli intelligence.
Yeah, it's wild. To me, I mean, you got Building 7, that's a smoking gun in my opinion. And then when it comes to the whodunit, I think I wouldn't say I guess this isn't a smoking gun, but man, it sure does raise a lot of questions. How would they know to be there? Why were they celebrating? Israeli art students, Netanyahu and Silverstein, Netanyahu's comment that it was good for Israel, and then I can't remember who it was, the Project for American Prosperity or whatever. They said they were going to take out 7 countries. It was who was the general?
General Wesley Clark.
Clark said they were going to take out 7 countries. What, we got 2 left? Iran and
Iran really is the last one.
Because it's Yemen, Lebanon,
Syria,
Iraq. I don't know. Not that great with geography,
no,
but
not Egypt. Ethiopia, I think, was another one. There was quite a few that we are currently engaged in military war with. So I'll touch more on that in just a few moments here. Because I have access to Haaretz now, we can go in and look at this article. This one was published on the 25th of 2001. I'm surprised that they never took it down, but here it is. 2 Otago workers received messages predicting the World Trade Center attack. So the Otago is a Israeli intelligence firm, and they
messaging service, correct? Like a kind of like
yeah.
Signal, but it's an Israeli messaging service for Israelis.
So Otago, the instant messaging service, says that 2 of its employees received messages 2 hours before the Twin Towers attack on September 11, predicting the attack would happen. How is that possible? How is it always the Israeli intelligence that seems to be surrounding the World Trade Center and benefiting from the aftermath?
Yeah.
Absolutely insane.
Silverstein wasn't in his office that morning. He had
Right.
a dermatology appointment where he is
Right.
always having lunch or breakfast on that given day of the week, every day for years, and he's absent that day. Sure, he
Right.
might have had a dermatology.
What are the odds?
Yeah, what are the odds?
So some people think, okay, we had a 9/11 commission. All the people, said, yeah, this is, the official narrative. What it is. The 9/11 commission report is the conclusive piece of evidence that shows Al-Qaeda did it, and there's nothing else to worry about. Well, what's up with the commission report? A lot of people don't know that the 9/11 commission report was a scandal, that the folks who were participating in the inquiry were blocked by the Pentagon from certain information. The author of the commission report, Philip Zelikow, authored the report before the commission had even met. So the official report was finished before the body had even convened and began its inquiry. Philip Zelikow in college wrote his thesis paper on how to manufacture an event and get public support behind it. So this guy was a false flag propagandist from the beginning. The people on the 9/11 commission were outraged by the Pentagon blocking information from them and think that the 9/11 commission report itself is a farce. Let's hear what they have to say.
Commission members even considered bringing criminal charges against Pentagon officials who had deliberately lied to them about the military's complete lack of response on that day. But perhaps the most cryptic of all the dissenting commissioners was Bob Kerrey. In 2009, he remarked that 9/11 was a 30-year-old conspiracy, but no mainstream reporter has ever followed up with him to clarify this statement.
Do you support a criminal investigation into 9/11? Because I know yours was an exposition. It was not a criminal investigation.
I don't think so, but I don't know. I mean, I do support a permanent commission to examine not just that, but lots of other things in this area. So.
But if it's a permanent cover-up, then it's. I mean, if it's an act of war and it's hiding things, which everyone on your commission knew that the Pentagon was changing their stories, lying to you, and it's a cover-up of an act of war, and under Article 3, Section 3 of the Constitution, it's treason. So unless we get to the very bottom of it, then we're still talking treasonous exposition.
This is a longer conversation. I'm not sure this one you ever get to the bottom of it.
We have to, or we can't save our countries.
I don't think. Well, if that's the condition upon which we're going to be saving our country, there's a problem. It's a 30-year-old conspiracy.
No, I'm talking about 9/11.
That's what I'm talking about.
Oh, you are. You mean
yeah.
this?
Yeah. Anyway, I got it.
Okay, be well.
Okay, thanks.
9/11 was a 30-year conspiracy, right from the horse's mouth of one of the lead members of that commission. I think that is another piece of evidence that suggests the official narrative is totally bogus, and that everywhere you look on the 9/11 story, there's more questions than answers, tragically.
Yeah, I'm going to add one thing here. And if you're not watching and following James Corbett, you really need to. You do. He's got the documentary 9/11 Trillions, 9/11 War Games. I believe he has another one on how Al Qaeda was not a part of it, but nonetheless, 9/11 Trillions. Part of that story is the insider trading. So we wrote this article on the Truth Expedition Substack a while back. So in April of this year, Follow the Money. And it discusses Lucky Larry Silverstein and all the money he profited. I mean, billions of dollars. Overall, he gained $4.6 billion in the attacks, but there was insider trading. So somebody knew ahead of time that this was going to happen. And in fact, several universities, the SEC, investigated this, and it's all laid out in this article, so you should definitely check it out. But the Belgian finance minister declared there's strong suspicions. We found president of Germany's central bank. What we found makes us sure that people connected to the terrorists must have been trying to profit from the tragedy. Example of insider trading, and this is where it's very interesting. So there's a company called Stratasec. And so what Stratasec does is security. They were a tiny little business prior to 9/11, but they basically took over airport security after 9/11. And none other than Wirt Walker bought 56,000 shares of this the days before 9/11. Who's Wirt Walker? He's a business partner and brother of George W. Bush, or business partner of Marvin Bush, brother of George W. Bush. So connected there, very connected. So somebody shorted the, here's some more information here on Wirt Walker, but somebody shorted the airlines and then also put a bunch of money into companies like Raytheon that were going to explode in value because they knew we were going to go to war after this. So somebody knew. And so it's funny, this morning when I was looking this stuff up again to find documented evidence, I looked and, I found Snopes. So Snopes says it's false. These fact checkers say this is false. Insider trading on 9/11, false. But then when you read even their investigation of this, their narrative on this, Snopes, is that first they call it false, but then when you read it, they say, yes, there was insider trading, but investigators found that there were no conceivable links to Al Qaeda. So in other words, yes, there was insider trading way outside the norm, but since it wasn't connected to Al Qaeda, who didn't do 9/11, they call it false. So and what Gunnar and I are presenting here today is really the tip of the iceberg. We could go on for days on this, but we really want to stick to what's in our faces, kind of what we think are more or less the smoking guns, and and hopefully that you'll share this video with others, because more people need to be woken up to the psychopaths destroying our world.
Yeah, we're really just trying to give you an abbreviated presentation of the evidence that is the in our minds the most damning pieces of evidence against the official narrative.
And didn't you write an article on 9/11 last year? I can't remember the name of it. I'll try to find it really quick. But yeah, if you go to
I've got them both queued up here. So I just wanted to say this lastly too. A lot of people don't know this. You know, what are the victims' families going to do to, get compensation for their grievances? A lot of people don't know that the victims' families successfully sued an Israeli intelligence company that was in charge of airport security that day. Pull up the presentation again, Mark. So this is ICTS International. And it is a firm that was created by Israeli intelligence, ex-members of the Shin Bet. So this is Israeli intelligence company, and they were found liable for negligence for allowing these hijackers to board planes. It is incredibly coincidental that it is an Israeli company founded by Shin Bet members that was held responsible for the negligence of allowing these hijackers to board the plane. So it just, again, is another piece of evidence that shows every time there was a safety guard in place, the establishment, the global conspiracy here had someone in place to ensure that the hijackers were able to board, that Cheney was told the intercepting jets to stand down. Just everywhere you look, you have infiltration of the global intelligence. So let's go to our articles here now. So let's share this one. This is the best article that we have to introduce people to 9/11. This goes through and presents the what happened, who done it, and why. And this is another great article to share with people. So effectively, what the theory goes is that it was all Israeli intelligence that was surrounding the events of 9/11, that the purpose of 9/11 was to implement the Greater Israel Project. Like Wesley Clark said, this is a picture of the dancing Israelis on the rooftop here. So, like General Wesley Clark said, we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq, then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, not Ethiopia, excuse me, Somalia, and finishing off with Iran. 7 countries in 5 years. This was like, in the early 2000s. We are very behind schedule, which is why I think there is a an urgency, and the war drums are beating even kind of in the background of war with Iran. You see that Israel has attacked virtually all of these countries surrounding it in the last 2 weeks. The reason why September 11 was important and still carries on today is because it kicked off the Greater Israel Project, and it allowed for the Israelis to recruit an army. What happened after 9/11? All of the patriotic kids of my generation signed up and went overseas to fight this war. And they came back. They didn't find weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. They didn't find any conclusion to the war in Afghanistan. And what you see in Syria now, we work in concert with Al Qaeda to overthrow the Assad government. You're seeing U.S. diplomatic party go to Lebanon and tell the Lebanese that they have to remove Hezbollah from their country, that they're not going to facilitate any further trade unless the Lebanese themselves start a war with Hezbollah. So what you're seeing is the Greater Israel Project take effect. And this article, it presents so much of the information of who, why, where, and how. And we also have another series of articles called the Mideast Debrief. And really what this does is it ties in religious prophecy to the Greater Israel Project, and ties in the motivations behind 9/11 and the end game, the end goal of Greater Israel and the impact on the United States. So, yeah.
There's the 9/11 clairvoyance too from April. And I just want to say this, I'm starting to believe, I mean, because, right after 9/11, that day, I'm like, we got to blow these Arabs up. I mean, I am guilty, I admit it, of being a fool, not thinking it through. My initial reaction before I saw anything about Building 7 or anything is like, we've got to go to war with these people. That was my reaction. And, I was brainwashed, mind controlled to believe in this concept of radical Islam. I don't think that's the case. I really don't. I work with a lot of Muslims. I had a conversation with this gal at work the other day, a couple weeks ago, and very, very candid. I asked her, do Muslims want to kill all Christians? Do they want to take over? She's like, absolutely not. Our religion preaches harmony and forgiveness. I really don't think there's such a thing as radical Islam, except for, deep state created.
Right.
I'm sure there's a few militant Islamic people out there, but they don't have the capacity to pull this stuff off. I really think it's just been embedded in our brains from a Zionist kind of perspective and push so that we go against them. Muslims love Jesus Christ. They don't believe he was the son of God, but they do believe he was a prophet, and they value and look up to Jesus Christ.
They
Jews
think
hate
he's Messiah and that he's coming again. So they have ultimate reverence for
So I mean, I don't
Christians
know.
and for Jesus.
And again, I don't claim to know. We here at the Truth Expedition, we don't claim to know. We are on an expedition to find some truth. And the more I learn, the more I am starting to believe that there's no such thing as militant radical Islam. We created Al-Qaeda. We now put radical Islamic folks in charge of Syria. It's just wild. It's bizarre.
It is wild. If folks understood anything about Islamic eschatology, and their understanding of the end times, they would question why ISIS is not attacking Israel, why Al-Qaeda is not attacking Israel directly. Well, it's because ISIS and Al-Qaeda are a CIA Mossad front.
Yeah,
and the perfect example of that is Syria, where you have Jelani beheading people and then wearing a suit, and now he's a bona fide diplomat. It's insane. And when people look at the background history of Al-Qaeda and the CIA, we can see that it's a Hollywood smokescreen designed to rally hatred against fictional characters.
Absolutely. It's gross. It's too
It
bad.
is gross. And we just want to reiterate here, we love people of all sizes, flavors, colors, and religious affiliation.
Nothing
So
against Jewish people at all.
nothing against
We have
Jewish people.
friends.
There's
It's
many
not-
Jewish people
It's not
who
about
are
Jews. It's
speaking
about
out against this.
It's about corrupt governments, including our own,
Right.
including Israel's. It's not about, I am not an anti-Semite. So if you go ahead and label me that, go for it. Whatever. I am not. I love all people. I don't care. I don't judge. I judge based on character. I have
Right.
nothing against Jewish people.
I
Absolutely
think it's racist and prejudiced to assume that the state of Israel is representation of Judaism in general. That's not the case. If you look at some of our previous episodes, especially with the one with Rabbi Feldman of Natira Karta, we are open to all messages and all people. I think that's another incredible episode that puts into perspective what the political Zionist endeavor truly is, and that is a greater Israel, the ends justify the means type of doctrine, which is controlling our foreign policy to the detriment of the U.S. citizen and the world. Our reputation around the world has suffered greatly because of our actions, because of our foreign policy that is Abrahamic. We're calling for a secular foreign policy that is in line with what Ron Paul describes as speaking softly, carrying a big stick, and promoting world trade, and promoting peace around the world. We will benefit greatly by ceasing this warfare, by grabbing the reins of our government and promoting peace and free trade.
Yeah, I should mention too. So we just interviewed Adam Berkowitz from Israel. He's a Zionist. We got a little pushback. Someone was critical on one of the comments, and we left it up there that we didn't push back on this guy, that we didn't challenge him. That's, you know what were we going to accomplish by challenging him? We wanted him to speak his mind, as we did with Adam King, and get them to say what they believe as a kind of a placeholder for us to point to, like, yes, this is what they believe. Now,
right.
If us pushing back, challenging them, we're not going to change their mind. What is the point in this confrontational type of interview where they're just going to get upset and leave and not say what they believe? What do you think, Gunnar?
Well, we want to promote peace here, and I consider myself a weatherman of truth, right? Okay, so I'm a deist. I think that God exists, but I don't subscribe to Abrahamic eschatology. I don't participate in that type of theology. But I do love people of all religious faiths, and when I see the conflict brewing, it makes me sad. So I consider myself a weatherman of the current events of religious prophecy. And I think that people's understanding of religious prophecy and their motivations, aspirations to see them come true drives geopolitical events. I ask, who's in power? What do they believe? And what are they doing about it? And when you begin to understand that from a religious perspective and a geopolitical perspective, the world makes a lot more sense. My goal in this is to prevent the collective religious theologies from jumping us all off of a cliff. If Abrahamic eschatology carries out in the wrong way, then we see the book of Isaiah, the prophecy in the book of Isaiah coming true, that the world will be destroyed by fire, by nuclear weapons. I don't want that. Nobody wants that. Really, I don't think anybody really wants that. Maybe there are some religious fanatics that don't care, and I see that as being a problem, but I want to then try to educate people and be transparent with the teachings, the doctrines, the theology as it relates to geopolitical aspirations. So that is our goal here, is to try to promote peace and truth and not hate anyone. We don't hate anyone. That's, that's one of my flaws, is that I choose to see the best in people. And I'm 43 years old, and I'm not going to change.
I'm not changing either. So yeah, there you have it, folks. We redid it. The audio on our previous edition of 9/11 and check the audio again. God forbid we have to redo it, but thank you so much for tuning into the Truth Expedition. Don't tread on us. Don't shed on us.
Peace, everyone.